Right, so we have covered in child development. There are main 5 areas. So out of that, I have covered physical development, social development, emotional development, and language development. And then the fifth one is cognitive development. This is a little this focused a little more in our specification and also our assignment. So let's get into this. So cognitive, we know from last session, our last week session, we spoke about cognitive a lot, about cognitivism and all that. So cognitive development means the mental abilities, the intellectual abilities, like thinking, learning, and the memory and all that. So reasoning and logical thinking, critical thinking, problem solving, all those skills are developed under cognitive development. So this is the one of the psychologists, a Swiss psychologist, that came up with the theory of cognitive development, John Piaget, a Swiss psychologist. So all these are theories, like we spoke about learning theories last time. These also theory. So this psychologist came up with something called the theory of cognitive development. So there are pros and cons in that. There are things certain people agrees with and doesn't agree with. So I think he was something mainly genetic, biological. He was into biology, and then later on he little by little focused on child psychology and childhood. And it is said that John Piaget um, developed the theory of cognitive development mainly from, he got 3 kids. So it is said that he was focusing on the 3 kids, his own 3 children, and that's how he observed closely the 3 children, and that's how he came up with the theory of cognitive development. So so sometimes people are like, okay, because that's a very small sample, so there are few agreements and disagreements there. Anyway, this is just a theory, so let's move on. So when it comes to John Piaget, he says that cognitive development happens within 3 key concepts. He used the word schemas, assimilation, and accommodation. So schemas means it's something like symbolic, right? So a schema is known as a mental structure, like a mental framework. He also used to tell it's like a building block, right? So now imagine, as adults, if we look at a pen, our brain and mind can say, okay, that's a pen. This is a black pen. If I take another one, red pen, okay, that's also a red pen. So our mind can do that quickly, right? So that is also a schema. If you think of everything is a mental image, right? It's a mental representation, anything. So that's called a schema. For example, if we think of a library, now I'm not going to a library right now, but when I think of a library, the schema, the mental interpretation in my head is, okay, a library is a quiet place, there'll be so much of bookshelves, and there will be a queue to get into the library to check out the books, something like that. If I think of a restaurant, I have a mental representation. Okay, there will be tables, so if I'm going to dine in the restaurant, obviously I'll have to sit, and then obviously a waiter might come, then a menu, then the food might arrive. At the end, I might have to pay and go out, like a schema, a mental representation, right? So then cognitive, in our last session we came across, when it comes to cognitive, we just imagine the brain and the mind as a computer. Just imagine your brain and the mind as a computer, or else you can even think of it as a huge filing cabinet, something like that. So in our head there are so many folders, right? Imagine it's a hard drive, you have so many folders. So let's say when it comes to a child, when the first time the child sees a dog, right? Children are very curious. So let's say the child asks the parents what that is, then the parents say that's called a dog. You can see they can be pets. You can see the dog has 4 legs and a fluffy tail and some whiskers and huge teeth. That's a dog. So what happens is, in the child's mind, a mental framework, a mental uh, representation, he's imagine it's a hard drive, opens a folder, dog, it's there in the head, right? That's called a schema. That's called a schema. So then the other word is called assimilation. Assimilation means, now whenever the kid sees another 4-legged mammal or even a dog, now the kid can identify that's a dog. So similarly, suppose assimilation means, suppose the kid sees a cow, right? Then in the kid's head there's a folder called dog, right? So the cow has 4 legs, a tail and all that, so the kid might say that's also a dog. But then parents will say, no, that's not a dog, that's called a cow, right? So the problem is, in the kid's mind, the kid doesn't have a file or a folder called cow, right? So he just have something called dog. But so what he did was, he went through the characteristics, a mammal with 4 legs and a tail, that's why he called dogs. That's called assimilation. What they try to do is, they try to recall from what they already have, new information from what already they have. But the problem is, but the new information doesn't fit to that folder. So the kid will have to open a new folder called cow, right? So that is only called accommodation. New information, like rather than modifying the old folder, you'll have to accommodate. You'll have to have a new separate file for the new information. So modifying information. So that's the basic idea. Let's move on. So yeah, these concepts explain how individuals build and refine their understanding. And there's something called equilibration, that is basically equilibrium. That means, so that's like a cycle. Now you need to balance with the new information and all the information being updated. It's like a loop, it goes on. Yeah, the schemas are the mental structures that represent concepts, objects, events, even events, right? Suppose it's a birthday party, and the child said, okay, it's a birthday party, so there'll be definitely cake, there'll be kids with pointed hats. Mental representation, even for objects, as I mentioned. So that's how it's information is organized. Imagine it's as a filing cabinet or something. Then assimilation is the process of taking new information and fitting it into existing schema. As I told, okay, you have the dog folder. Now you see a cow, you try to fit into the cow to the dog folder, but it can't happen. So you understand that's different. So that's where accommodation is needed. Accommodation is modifying an existing schema or creating a new one. So basically creating a new one and opening a new folder and putting the new information, something like that. So this is basically what I was trying to explain. In this, they are talking about a cat, you can see.